Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to the new season of the Giles and the Goalie podcast. Both Ben and I appreciate your listening to the show every week. Before we get to this week's show, I just want to ask you a couple of favors here. To help support this podcast, I want to encourage you to check out zonecoverage.com/subscribe. Use our promo code GATG20 to get a year's subscription to Zone Coverage for just $20. The subscription helps out our show and our written content. It gives you access to all the great content across the website, which covers all of Minnesota sports, so you have full-on access to all of it. Again, that's zonecoverage.com/subscribe, promo code GATG20. The other thing you can do to help us out, if you can't afford the subscription right now, which, hey, we get it, simply subscribe to our show via iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts every week. If you are one of our iTunes listeners, please drop us a rating to help boost up the show. If you could do that, maybe spread the word about this otherwise fine podcast if you really enjoy it, you'd be doing us a solid favor. Well, that's all I have for you today. Thanks a lot, and enjoy the show and the new season. Cheers.
The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get Stinko.
Welcome to the Giles and the Goalie podcast. Yes, we are back for season number 6. Lucky number 6 for some of you out there. If you dig the number 6, if you're atheists or love your satanic rituals or what have you.
It's taking a turn.
Yeah. Woo, we're off to a hot start. Straight out of hell.
No kidding.
I am Giles Farrell. That is Ben Remington.
Hello.
We are kicking this off at our beloved unnamed bar and grill in Roseville, Minnesota.
Yes.
Where it has been so long since I had been here, they had to ID me today for my beverage.
Travesty.
Yeah, sucks. Don't do that. I get appalled. I'm grouchy.
This is what happens when we both move to the South Metro, Giles. That's just unfamiliar territory. No longer feels like home.
No, I liked it when I was right down the road.
Nobody shouts your name when you walk in the door every time.
No.
Yep.
Yeah, we are starting our season kind of a little bit late, but that's because I was on a vacation for a good long week.
Yeah.
In Florida, which was nice until I picked up a cold at the end of the trip, and yeah, so that's why I'm kind of a little nasally sounding here today. But Florida was good. I'm ready to get back into the season, except not really. It's just like I could use another month before the season starts, and I don't know. Like, you can't tell. Like, I'm just like so not interested in like the Wild's preseason or trade. Like, their roster's set. So there's not really much talk about, like, unless you really want deep diving Drew Stafford discussion. Like, it is what it is at this point, and I don't know. Like,
I mean, they added Matt Zuccarello. Come on, making moves. They got a new GM.
Yeah, which I guess is a perfect segue into our first topic that we have, as we will try to preview the season here that's going to start this week. Bill Guerin trying to get active as general manager here in his debut season as the Wild general manager. Hopefully he should last longer than his predecessor at the position. So once he clears the 14-month mark, he's good. But TSN reported in the last week that Bill Guerin was trying to get that top 6 center that the Wild have been lacking. And that is not surprising at all, and it just made me feel like time is a flat circle.
Right.
Because if you're Doug Risebrough, if you're Chuck Fletcher, if you're Paul Fenton, or if you're Bill Guerin, you're always looking for a top 6 center. Yeah. So you're just in that revolving door of trying to find it. Yep. And I have to feel like that is something the Wild put out there. Like, they want teams to know that they're open for business, essentially, and that
they're willing ready to mingle.
They're willing to talk. And it was Darren Dreger who noted that the Wild were willing to use their assets of, draft capital and, prospects, to help maybe move that along. But I guess I am kind of surprised that that was something that got put out there. Like, I don't know that the Wild did that for sure, but I have a feeling that was them. Like, when something like that comes out, you kind of have to wonder who put that out there.
Right.
So I have to feel like that's the Wild kind of signaling the league, hey, let's dance. But
I feel like the reaction to this news should be no S, Sherlock. Like, yeah, you want a top 6 center.
Congratulations.
It's been 20 years you've needed a top 6 center.
You've figured a problem. But this is my concern is to trade for a center of top 6 quality, you have to give up a lot of draft capital. You have to give up a decent amount of prospect capital and NHL quality talent even. Like, you can get a mix of all three. So you're going to give up premium assets for, probably somebody who is probably closer to 30 than what you'd care for. And you'd have to even give up more if you're going to get somebody who's 23, 24, 25, because you still have premium years left. And I wince thinking about that. I just feel like, it's not a palatable thing to say, but your best bet is to still draft and develop centers, which I think is where the focus needs to be, in hopes that somebody can turn into that top 6, because you're giving up a lot to get, something for somebody who, you're going to get probably some decent years out of, but, their best years are probably going to be behind them.
Right. Yeah, my concern with this is the whole invitation to this swingers party that the Wild are opening up is you don't have much draft capital. You don't have much prospect capital.
No.
Well, you do. You have one big blue chip, and that would be my concern. Is Guerin wants a top 6 center. He wants to, because he sees what everyone else sees, right? That this team is right on the cusp of being a playoff team still. They were one Matt Dumba injury away from being a playoff team last season, and we'll get to that later. But this team isn't that far away, and so he, if he's looking for a top 6 center now, that means he's willing to mortgage the future. And my fear would be, as a Wild fan, he's willing to mortgage one Kirill Kaprizov. And that's, when you're looking for this team having any future whatsoever, that's got to be kind of terrifying, because he's all you got. People love Matt Boldy, and that's great. And, people like the futures of Greenway, Cunnin, Donato, etc. That's great. But, you have one guy that has a shot to be really elite. And if you're going to give him away, it really that could really hurt you in the long run. That's my concern over the dog and pony show we're getting with this.
Disclaimer, the word elite is a trademark registered to P.J. Fleck, head coach of the 4-0 Minnesota Golden Gophers football team.
I row the boat. It's cool.
We row the boat. Yes. This is a row the boat podcast.
This podcast rows the boat.
We're rowing the boat. Don't glare at me.
Go lose to Baylor.
Yeah. No one likes Baylor.
Yeah.
Literally, the whole country is behind Iowa State because everybody hates Baylor.
They couldn't get
and
it
you
done.
blew it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm shaming my fiance on the podcast. That's going to bite me in the ass later.
Yeah, it will.
No, I built up some good capital this last week in Disney World. She had a crazy schedule that I adhered to unabated. So.
Nice. Good job.
So yeah, that was kind of the newsworthy thing that came out the last week. And obviously, if you read Michael Russo of The Athletic, you saw that Bill Guerin is going to try and meet Kaprizov late November, early December,
Sure.
along with his agent Dan Milstein, to try and reiterate that he is wanted here. So it sounds like things are moving in a positive direction there when it comes to the Wild Star prospect. But
I don't wonder if, and this is just thinking out loud, and I don't know if we were getting to the CBA issue, but I don't wonder if they couldn't grab Kaprizov after the end of the KHL season and still have him on the squad at some point in this actual season.
I believe they can, because if you remember, I think it was 2 years ago, Eli Tolvainen, he came over from, I think it was Jokerit of the KHL, and he was eligible on the Preds playoff roster.
Yeah.
I don't think he ever played. I think he was just a healthy scratch, but he was still eligible to play. So I think if the Wild are at that point where they're in the playoffs still, which one we're going to get to later, but he could be eligible to play once the KHL season comes to an end.
Yeah.
So
I just think it's an interesting
it's a possibility.
Yeah. And not that that's anything guaranteed, and certainly after playing a full KHL season, their season obviously already started, and probably being in the playoffs because he's on a really good team. I don't know that Kaprizov has a lot of interest in that, but it's a possibility and just makes for kind of interesting footnote. I don't know if you did you have the CBA thing on the docket? That might be the bigger news of the week, was that there's not going to be a lockout before next season, and that really, that really is probably the most important thing to come out in the last week to Wild fans because of Kirill Kaprizov, because you were looking at his contract expiring the summer where there's a lockout, and that could just get ugly. I mean, really, really ugly.
A booming lockout would mean he could possibly sign a new contract in the KHL and further cloud his future in the NHL.
And so, the extension of the CBA, which I think was a surprise to a lot of folks. I know they had been working on it, but labor peace is always a surprise in the NHL. Anytime there's a shred of labor peace, it's surprising.
So that's very surprising.
Right. But this is huge news for Wild fans. Not only is there not going to be a lockout, but there's not going to be a lockout when your top prospect is slated to arrive stateside.
Right.
I mean, that's something that I don't think can be understated right now as far as the news of this preseason has gone.
That's a favorable bounce. The Wild don't get favorable bounces ever. And
it's like on Madden when you punt and it bounces at the 2-yard line and goes directly out of bounds instantly.
Speaking of unfavorable bounces, I was watching Liverpool yesterday, and they won over Sheffield 1-0, and their goal was scored on a ball that was up in the air, and their midfielder, Gini Wijnaldum, he basically kicked it out of the air, but then it was hit so hard, it took a couple of bounces, and the keeper went down to get it, and it literally bounced through his legs.
Oh.
And I told this to our mutual friend Dan, that was the Wild equivalent of a goal allowed in soccer. It really was. I was like, that's a Wild goal.
Yeah.
That's the soccer equivalent of a Wild goal. I couldn't believe that just happened. And it's nice to be on the other side of that, where you're the one scoring it, not you're getting it against.
I mean, but they also won a championship, so it's a completely different feeling than a Minnesota sports team.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm full of myself now. I don't have this fear of losing. I'm just like, we're going to win more. Your team's
reigning champions.
Yeah.
I mean, you're on cloud 9.
We're going to do it all. All right. Before we lose all of our listeners for soccer talk, the Wild are opening the season this week. They do that on Thursday. But as we get set to open the 2019-2020 regular season, this season is going to open, at least to me, with there's a lot of question marks here, and we're going to kind of go over some of those, but the season will be dominated by how these questions are or aren't answered as the Wild prepare to open the season in Nashville on Thursday night. But heading into the season, I guess ultimately, what is your biggest question mark? What has to get answered for the Wild to have a successful season in your eyes?
I think it's just the I don't want to cop it out here, but I think the biggest question is going to be the young forwards.
That's fair.
I think,
that's what I basically wrote all summer.
Right. You know what you're getting out of Parise. You know what you're getting out of Zucker to an extent. You know what you're getting out of, you hope you know what you're getting out of Koivu. Stahl, kind of same thing. Those are players on the decline, but they're still producing. Kevin Fiala, complete wild card. Ryan Donato, complete wild card. Jordan Greenway, complete wild card. Luke Cunnin, complete wild card. So,
Luke Cunnin, center or wing, complete wild card.
Right. He's the new Charlie Coyle. Oh, poor Luke. No. Anyway, so, yeah, I just think that this season, and don't get me wrong, they could still have a successful year, those 4 or 5 guys, and the team could still suck. Let's not kid ourselves. But I think if the team is very successful this season, if the team is a playoff team this season, it's going to be because 1 or 2 or even 3 or 4 of those guys step up. Like you can almost make a correlation where if one of those guys steps up and has an NHL quality season, they're going to win, X amount of points. 2 guys, X amount of points. 3 guys, X amount of points. And it's almost like, it's almost exponential at that point. So I think they're the linchpin to this season. I think the defense is good. We know the defense is good. Devin Dubnyk is always a question, but I still think that he's consistent enough to where the young forwards are the focus.
No, that is exactly the biggest question heading into the season, and like I said, I've written in that basically all summer at Zone Coverage that the Wild need those players to step up and fill the production voids left by your Granlunds, Niederreiters, and Coyles to kind of help guide this team back into contention for the playoffs and make them a decent scoring hockey team again. After Matt Dumba went out last year, the Wild were the worst scoring team in the league.
No
and
coincidence.
It wasn't close. They were not good on offense, and it really became compounded when they traded those players away, especially when Coyle and Granlund went within a week. Yep. The Wild offense really went into the tank.
And they lost Koivu, too, which not a huge offensive guy, but it's still a player.
My next question that I have is, can Jason Zucker bounce back? And this is going to be something I'm probably going to write on at some point this week, because last year he had 21 goals, and his shooting percentage was down from his career average. I believe, I don't know where other people stand, but I believe he comes into this year, he's got a major chip on his shoulder.
Yeah.
The now former general manager of this team tried to trade him 3 times.
7 times, yeah.
Yeah. Roughly 73 times. And he had a down year that, you say what you want about on-ice production, but there's also a mental aspect of this game that we have to respect. And when you're heavily in trade discussion and that gets out, that does have an impact. I know, as much as I like it, the stat sheet, there's also things we can't quite correlate that I also have to kind of factor in.
Absolutely.
So I believe that, you have a more relaxed atmosphere with Bill Guerin now, and you have this chip on the shoulder of Jason Zucker, and his shooting percentage should come back up to his average, which is 12.1%. Mm-hmm. And I think I've put this out there. He will have a 28-goal season, which is a perfect rebound year, which is something the Wild badly need, because this team always has this is no means phrasing, problems finishing. But, even if you average out his career numbers over 82-game season, he's going to score more goals than he did last year, because I think if I remember right, when I averaged it out, it was just a shade under 24 goals was his 82-game average.
Sure.
And he only scored 21 last year. I think that's going to come up. I got him at 28 just because.
What was his shooting percentage last year?
9.8%.
That's lower, yeah.
And I think you have a good season of him, and he earns that contract back that seemingly, you kind of wondered, should he have gotten?
Yeah.
But that's a big question that I have, and I'm sure other people maybe feel differently, but I feel like he's going to answer that question resoundingly this year.
Sure. No, I would agree. I think that he, I don't want to say that he's, some kind of super key to this team. I think Jason Zucker kind of is what he is. He is that 25-ish goal scorer. But I think you're right. Last year, talk about a nightmare year for him. He signs a contract and then almost immediately is swirled up in trade rumors with Arizona, then swirled up in a trade which allegedly happened but officially didn't with Calgary. And then he's all but officially traded to Pittsburgh, and it gets vetoed. So that's not to be underrated. And I think that you're right. The mental side of the game is something that is just not very often considered. Sometimes it gets, over-analyzed. But I think, when you're sitting there and your general manager can't wait to get rid of you, which was the most bizarre thing because he had just signed you to a long-term contract. Crazy pills. That's going to weigh on somebody. That's going to have an effect. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, whether you're mopey and you're upset about it and you play worse because of it, or, you're pissed off and you start to press. And pressing can be just as bad as having a bad attitude. When you're trying too hard, especially in hockey, all of a sudden, the little things go out the window. You're squeezing your stick into sawdust. That's a very real thing.
How many times in the Wild have we seen a player squeeze his stick into sawdust?
I know. It seemed like every year there's a guy, and Zucker was that guy last year. So, I think you're right. I think he's back this year. I think that, that's a good thing, and this team needs all the finishing ability it can get. And if he can get anywhere close to that 30-goal plateau that we know he can hit, they're going to need it.
The other question I have, or my bigger question, is Devin Dubnyk did not have a good year last year.
Nope.
Analytically speaking, was kind of below average in the NHL
brutal.
in 5-on-5 save percentage. And that is very much different from the rest of his time in Minnesota, where he's been very good. But the Wild play very well in front of him defensively, and that makes it even alarming that he did not have that good of a season, despite the fact the Wild were really limiting, the kind of quality shots against. And he's another key here. He's always been a key since he arrived that day in January of 2015 in Buffalo. He has to be better. He has to be, very much above average. He has to be top 10 in the league, essentially, for this team to go. And you could probably argue that if he was decent in November, December last year, the Wild maybe don't trade Niederreiter. They don't trade Granlund or Coyle.
Yep.
It kind of had a ripple effect. But Devin Dubnyk is very much a question for me. He seemingly is going to get somewhere around 57-ish starts this year that we found out here in the last week.
Okay.
Which, something I've been, championing for so long.
Yeah.
I'm out of breath from saying that so many times, but that's not the concern. The concern is the other games when you have to give the net to Alex Stalock, who, is a Mexican jumping bean in goal. It's an adventure is what it is.
Oh.
It's a roller coaster. You don't know what you're going to get, and I always think the best way to describe Alex Stalock is the story of when you took Roz to the Wild game when he started, and she about lost her mind, and she had really never seen him before.
No.
So that's the perfect way to go about Alex Stalock, who is incredibly below league average for a backup goaltender.
Yes.
And so, more or less goaltending has to be great for the Wild to want to get back into the playoffs. And we're going to get to this in a little bit, but the odds have the Wild finishing last in the Central Division again.
Yeah.
So goaltending has to do better than what it was last year for the Wild to exceed those expectations.
I just realized that bartender's wearing a Fred Smoot jersey.
Yeah. John's had that for like 3 years. It's my favorite quality of John.
That is amazing. I would love to see Devin Dubnyk get 57 starts a year. I would love to see the Wild's backup goalie get 25 starts a year.
You don't want to see Alex Stalock as the Wild's backup goaltender.
Yeah, pretty much. And you made mention to it. There's an argument to be made that Alex Stalock is the worst backup goaltender in the NHL. And
it's a good argument.
At least for teams that are non-tanking, let's say.
Get off my lawn, Duluth.
Yeah, right. So for teams that are trying to win, he's the worst backup goalie. And again, we kind of pound on Stalock, and especially me. I have nothing against the guy. I don't think that he's a bad person or anything like that. Like I'm not just raging on him because he was a Bulldog. You want to see him get better, and I don't have a ton of faith in that happening. I've kind of railed on Bob Mason a little bit in the past. I don't know that. I just don't know that Stalock's going to get to that level. You know what I mean? Like Darcy Kemper got ran out of town. Everyone thought that he was hot garbage because he had a bad half season.
He's doing okay now.
Yeah, he's doing fine. He's going to split time in Arizona. He had a great year last year. There's things like that where it's just like I don't know that Bob Mason is unlocking these goalies' potential. And Devin Dubnyk, same thing. Like
I started a little bit ago and I said time is a flat circle, and now here we are. We're railing on Alex Stalock. We're railing on Bob Mason. This podcast is a goddamn flat circle.
We've got bits. You always hope that like they talk about shows like, oh, they really hit their stride in season 3, or they really got really hit their stride sometime around season. Yeah,
we never had a stride.
No,
we just go round and round.
It's just the same crap for 6 years now, and it never changes. But yeah, I don't know. I'd love to see some progression, and I love that 1A and 1B model that teams use, where it's like, last year look at the Bruins, had a tremendous run because Tuukka Rask was great, but behind him Yaroslav Halak was fantastic as well.
Yeah, he was allowed to get a lot of time off.
Absolutely, and then no surprise, Tuukka Rask was phenomenal in the playoffs and carried them to the Stanley Cup final, and lost there because Binnington suddenly stood on his head for a couple of games, but. That's kind of how you should build your goaltending. Is you really want to have, and I get it, easier said than done, but you really want to have two guys that you can put complete trust in, and I don't know how you do that with Alex Stalock. Like I really want to see more out of him before I even think of him as a legitimate NHL backup, let alone a good one.
And he's 32 years old now. I don't think there's going to get any better.
Yeah, same.
There's not going to be a better performance. And I don't know how people can look at him even through like an apologist's eye and say, yeah, he's an integral part of this team. Like
enough to sign him to a 3-year extension, for instance? I mean, I said it last year. That might be the worst move Fenton made.
People love to rail on Paul Fenton for the Niederreiter trade,
of course,
the Granlund trade. People forget he signed Alex Stalock that 3-year extension. Let's talk about that. That is terrible.
Yeah. It wasn't the worst move he made. But
arguably.
It is, I think, arguably it might have been, but I think it is the least defensible move he made. Because with Nino for Rask, okay, maybe you think you have something with Rask. Maybe you think that... I know you don't. Obviously we don't. But maybe you think that he's going to regain some kind of... Same thing with Granlund. Maybe you think Kevin Fiala is the next Wayne Gretzky. Maybe, he's an elite scorer. With signing Alex Stalock to the extension, what is the upside of that?
There's no upside. And there's always good backup goaltenders available on the free agent market at cheap.
The economy of the NHL doesn't mean you have to lock up your backups.
You sign a good backup, what it does is it gives Devin Dubnyk more time off during the regular season, and it allows players like Kaapo Kähkönen to get their reps in the AHL, and they really only get called up in the event of injury. Sure, that still applies to Stalock, but you're not affording Dubnyk more days off because what it does is Alex Stalock loses the trust of the coach by seemingly mid-January every year.
Yep.
So then Devin Dubnyk has to start just about every game from there on out because the Wild are in must-win mode, and that's not going to change this year. Mid-January on out, the Wild are going to be in must-win mode. They're going to be a bubble playoff team again, and not having a good backup to get Devin Dubnyk a night off and keep him fresh has just killed this team, and it is another goddamn flat circle of time where give him a night off. I sit here on my couch and I can see that this is needed. People have written articles proving teams that give their goalies more rest in the playoffs, or no, more rest in the regular season, have better playoff success.
Yes.
It just doesn't make sense. How do you not see this? I mean, I guess the Wild don't have an analytics department, so nobody analytics is going to tell them you need a better backup goalie.
It's not like Fenton used them when he was making that decision at all, obviously. So, yeah.
We can sit here for a whole hour and talk about goaltending.
We could.
Because
I'd love to.
You've gotten me full on into going round and round on that. But
we can move on. It's fine.
And I don't know if you have any other major questions, but kind of my last one is Mikko Koivu entering the last year of his contract. Really haven't seen much of him in the preseason, coming off that serious knee injury. What is he going to be like? And he seems to be slated as the third-line center to open the season, which he seems to be on board with. He wants to give the young kids a chance.
Yeah.
I'm for that, giving somebody else the second-line center duties behind Eric Stahl.
Yeah.
Getting Koivu less reps seemingly would be better for the team in the long run because it just kind of keeps him a little more fresh. You're not wearing him down. But as Russo loves to hammer, you need a guy late in the third to win faceoffs, play defense. Koivu's still your guy because nobody else can do that on this team.
Yeah.
And so how does he respond from this injury at 36, last year of his deal? It does seem like this is going to be it for him, at least in a Wild uniform.
Yeah, I would love to be optimistic about Koivu because I have a lot of respect for what he's done, and I have a lot of respect for his legacy with the Wild. But I was pessimistic last year after his injury, and I kind of remain so. I don't see this ending particularly well. I just don't. I mean, you're 36, major knee surgery. It's not like he was fleet of foot before this. And when you lose so many steps to your competition, he's been a great defender because he knows the right places to be, and he certainly still has the size. But when you're really, we saw it with Victor Rask, last year. He's skating in quicksand. And I just really worry that as slow as Koivu already was before this injury, he got away with it because he was so skilled. And now, if he's a step slower, not only is this his final year, but it's going to end on a sour note. And I really, you really hate to see it. Genuinely, you do. But I that's my concern for him. I really hope that if it is getting that bad, that he's just able to leave on his own terms. If he wants to hang him up mid-season, you'd hate to see it because it means that it's going that poorly. But I just really hope that there's a pseudo-happy ending to this because I'm just very down on him and
it's not
the possibilities.
It's not good when you're speaking down of Koivu and then we're speaking very down on Victor Rask, who looks to be the 13th forward on the team at $4 million to open the season. And, really there's question marks at center between Eriksson Ek, Donato Cunnin, whoever they plug in there.
Right.
That is probably another underlying reason why Bill Guerin wants a top six center is because if Koivu can't really get back to even what he was last year, then Houston, we have problems. But, that's another question that really has to be marked heading into this year. And then, once Koivu's Wild tenure comes to an end, we come to the flat circle debate of should his number be retired, which I've been on record saying yes, but debate that for another day. Do you have any other kind of large questions that have to be asked of this season?
Well, I think we were going to get to Boudreau.
That's actually
I think that's the final question.
That's our next topic. Actually,
Sure.
is Bruce Boudreau is entering the final season of his 4-year contract that he signed now 2 general managers ago. Chuck Fletcher, who gave way to Paul Fenn, who gave way to Bill Guerin.
Yeah.
Very rare do you see a NHL head coach last through 3 general managers.
Right.
And we love Boudreau on this podcast.
Yeah.
We will continue our weekly Boudreau segment
Absolutely.
as the season starts. But do you see a future for him past this year? Does it depend on how the Wild do? Like, does he have to make the playoffs maybe to get an extension as the head coach? What should we reasonably expect?
Well, it's tough because we don't have any kind of feeling where Bill Guerin is on him. You know that Fletcher loved him because he brought him in. You know that Fenton hated him because he tried to get rid of him. It really depends on where Bill Guerin is, and honestly, where Bruce is himself. I mean, he's not a young guy.
No.
And he signed this contract. I don't think he said it was going to be his final. He said it was going to be his final job. He didn't say it was going to be his final contract. But, he also had a consultancy gig built into that contract as well.
Right.
So I see that kind of being the case. And it's unfortunate for Bruce because this is kind of going the way of Mikko where, if this is his final season, that's not probably a really great way to go out. And you really root for Bruce, not even as a Wild fan, not even as a Wild...
Just as a
coach.
Hockey,
you root for him to get a cup because that guy... deserved much better than he got at every stop he was at, including this one, for Christ's sake. And so you really root for the guy, and you really hope that he can get a cup. It's not going to happen with the Wild this season. Let's be honest.
Washington should have won at least 2 Stanley Cups
Right.
under him. Anaheim should have had 1.
Yeah.
And the Wild, well...
No. Jake Allen. So I think that... I don't know. I see this probably being his last season. And I see that, again, just like with Koivu, I just hope it's on his terms. I just hope that, towards the end of the season he says, hey, you know what? I'm hanging it up. Like, I've had a good run. I'm in my mid-60s now. I don't have anything left I can prove. I'm not going to jump aboard head coaching a Stanley Cup contending team at this moment. It was a good run. This is it. And he's going to move into that cushy, role with the Wild, hopefully staying with the organization. And, hopefully they can find a good successor. But that's just my feel on the deal. I just don't know that outside of wild amounts of success, no pun intended, I don't know that he's going to get extended as the coach. And I don't know that he wants to,
Right.
I think is the thing.
Yeah, you're not really sure what direction Bill Guerin will go in with head coach. He hasn't really tipped his hand too much. But when it comes to the next part of Boudreau's coaching life, post-coaching life, I really hope, somebody adds him as, a color commentator.
Oh, God, yes.
Which would be amazing. And we haven't touched on this, but the Wild are kind of rotating through radio play-by-play voices this year with Bob Kurtz taking seemingly what's going to be a swan song for him.
Sure.
And then kind of having some others fill in. And then the Wild are also having kind of a rotating door of color commentators on the TV side.
Yeah.
But Bruce Boudreau would be amazing color commentator on television. He's just a very quotable machine, and he's very insightful.
Yeah.
He's very more open than other hockey talking heads. And so getting him on TV in some fashion, I think, just as an NHL fan, you'd love to see, because he has a lot of personality.
Yeah.
And, whether that's next year or a few years, say if the Wild extend him, I don't care. Like, just getting him in kind of some cushy TV job, I think, would be really preferred, because, for crying out loud, we do a weekly segment on stuff he says. Like, if that doesn't say enough, as a very regional niche podcast,
emphasis on regional, emphasis on niche.
Yeah. So that'll be another interesting storyline to watch, is Bruce Boudreau coaching in the last year of his contract, and kind of how he manages things. Does he more coach to win the game, or does he look at the the long-term outlook still? So that's kind of another key figure to watch here as we move into the 2019-2020 season.
Mm-hmm.
So as we prepare for the season, we will return to a familiar bit we've done previous seasons as we get ready to kick off. We're going to scale it back a little bit. We're not going to go nuts with a lot of them, but we did want to touch on the over-under total that Bovada has set for the Minnesota Wild this season in terms of points. Which I don't know, you and I might actually have different opinion on, but
I still haven't made up my mind yet, to be honest. But it's because But
right now, as we record, Bovada has the Minnesota Wild over under for points at 87.5, which is the lowest out of any Central Division team. So basically, Bovada is saying the Wild are projected to come in last, from a betting standpoint. And so we have to ask, do you think they go over, they go under? And this is something even we'd like you to chime in with us about. Interact with us on Twitter at GATG Wild Podcast. Let us know what you think, because this is kind of a very gray area that we don't really know about. But do you think they go over that, or do you think they hit the under? Because last year, remember, they hit 83 points to finish the season.
Right. I think I'll start off by saying I think it's a good over-under. I think there's a lot of negativity about this team, and rightfully so. I mean, it's been, how many years of the same crap over and over again, flat circle, all that. But that's still, not an awful season. I mean, you're almost a 90-point team with all of this negativity around you, and so I'm, it's tough because you want to be negative, you want to kind of lean towards that just because of the direction the team is headed. But I'm going to take the over with the caveat that it's not going to be by much.
Right. It's going to be 89, 90.
You put a gun to my head, I'm probably going to pick this team at 88 points. Seriously. So I really do think it's a very good over-under. But I think last year, if they don't lose Matt Dumba, even with the terrible trades that Paul Fenton makes, they're probably a borderline playoff team. I mean, Matt Dumba probably gets them a couple of extra points, right? He probably gets them into the high 80s just off, and Koivu getting hurt as well. So I think that they are that team. I think they are kind of a high 80s, maybe even low 90s team. I think they're going to be better than people think. I think it was, was it SI? That had them at 68 points or something like that.
USA Today.
USA Today.
Who I'll remind you, 2 years ago had the Edmonton Oilers in the Stanley Cup final.
Of course, yeah.
Just to show you how reputable they are.
Right.
But
yeah, so I don't think they're going to be that bad. Don't get me wrong, there is a possibility for that out there. I think that's well within the plausible range for the Wild this year, but I think that, they're going to be the Wild. They're going to be a fringe playoff team. They're going to be, kind of mediocre when it's all said and done. They're going to be right around 90 points, and that's just kind of been this team for a long time with a few kind of outliers on either side.
See, I'm glad you took the over because I'm taking the under.
Okay, that's fair.
There's a lot of question marks on this team,
absolutely.
And we talked about it.
Absolutely.
I think Ryan Donato will pan out to be a pretty decent player for the Minnesota Wild. I think Boston gave up on him too soon, which is their mistake, and the Wild get a very decent young player in him, but Joel Eriksson is too big of a question mark. Kevin Fiala is too big of a question mark, even though he is a quote-unquote game breaker. Jordan Greenway is too big of a question mark. These guys have to show me something before I can buy in to what I'm trying to be sold.
Sure.
And so I think the Wild are going to come into that 80, 84 point range again. Devin Dubnyk will have his ups and downs again, as time is a flat circle. The defense will be very good, assuming people can stay healthy. Suter, Jared Spurgeon, who just signed a new contract, which is wonderful news to just about everyone. I think he'll be worth that 7-year extension. Matt Dumba, who has his sights set on 30 goals. But the scoring roles up front, even with my prediction of Jason Zucker going back up to 28, I worry about Eric Stahl coming back down, regressing a little bit more.
Sure.
Koivu not fully recovering from that injury. Matt Zuccarello is 32 years old. At some point, this guy has to start regressing. Even though the Wild seemingly have decent depth on all their lines now, I just can't quite buy yet what they're trying to sell on a playoff team. And going back to the goaltending, Alex Stalock, just massively questionable. He's a liability at this point. So the Wild come in under that 87.5 threshold. They miss the playoffs, but they get another, 10, 11, 12 draft lottery pick, which is just not what this team needs at this point.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, almost 100% on that. Again, I'm maybe a little bit optimistic, but I think
I stopped buying what they're selling.
and I'm totally with you, and I don't blame you that people do, and they're obviously feeling it because ticket sales, their ticket folks actually have to work this season selling tickets. So the warming house is no more. So I'm with you on that, and I totally get the negativity. But I just think it's gonna be more of the same. Like I don't want to sound overly positive because I'm not. I don't think this team has anywhere close to a shot at the division. I don't think this team is any kind of probable playoff team. I think they're a fringe team that could make it if everything goes right, but most likely they're a team just on the outside.
And I will counter to what I said with the fact, and it goes to more of your point, that the Central Division is not a sure thing right now.
Right.
Nashville, they traded PK Subban so they could sign Matt Duchene.
Sure.
Winnipeg, they're kind of they're a little bit questionable as to what we'll get out of them. They'll still be, offensively prolific. Dustin Byfuglien apparently contemplating retirement right now.
Yeah.
And their defense kind of took a hit this offseason. St. Louis, man, they could potentially be one of the worst, season after Stanley Cup champions in recent memory.
Yeah.
Honest to God, if Jordan Binnington doesn't play a full season like he did last year, the Blues are hurting.
Yeah.
They rode him big time.
And I think there's a lot of questions around him, and I think they're fair.
And the Dallas Stars, they're still questionable. Their defense is still very questionable to me. Even though they're going to put up a lot of offense, I actually think the Dallas Stars are probably the best bet to win the Central Division this year. Just because they have a good offense and they have Ben Bishop, who is very, very good. He's probably my third favorite goaltender in the league behind John Gibson, behind Henrik Lundqvist. So that's my gambler's bet on the Dallas Stars win the Central Division. Then you have, who am I missing? The
Chicago.
Blackhawks, who they're still...
You want to talk about bad defense for a second? Oh, my God.
Yeah. Woof. And then you have the Avalanche, who, they could take a massive step forward this year. They could win the division too. I like Dallas a little bit better. They have a little bit more poise and experience for my taste to say they'll win the division. But I think Colorado will be right there as well. They have a prolific offense, adding more depth to their forward lines. I think we'll have to see if that can come true this year. But so the point I'm trying to make is the Central Division is a little bit more wide open, which favors the Wild and maybe getting some extra points here and there.
Sure.
But it's still, I'm not comfortable enough in saying they can still cross that threshold.
I think the Central Division is what it has been for years, and where there's not necessarily a juggernaut in it, but it's still very good. Like the Wild could very well be the worst team in the division, and they're, we're talking about them being an 80-point team.
Yeah, you'll have 5 playoff teams and then 2 teams that would probably make the playoffs in a lesser division.
Sure. Yeah, so that doesn't, it helps the Wild and it doesn't, because there isn't a team that's going to flatten them every time they play, but then every night it's a grind. That division is an absolute grind. I think since realignment, I think it's hands down been the best division in the NHL. I think it's the toughest division in the NHL, at least.
No matter what division the Wild play in, it's a grind. Unless it was that 2011 season when they came in second in the division, like 30 points behind Vancouver, but nobody else made the playoffs except Vancouver, and Vancouver went to the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah.
So that will segue us into our regular season predictions for the Minnesota Wild as to how they finish, do they make the playoffs, etc., etc. So I will go first, since I made it pretty clear that they will come under that 87.5 threshold. They don't make the playoffs. They get another 10 to 12 lottery pick, which is just another flat circle timey thing. And Bruce Boudreau is not going to be the head coach moving forward. We see the end of Mikko Koivu. There will be some plus sides, like Jason Zucker scoring 28 goals. Ryan Donato has a very good season. As again, I'm just dumbfounded by Boston giving up on such a prized prospect so quick, but that'll probably be regarded as Paul Fenton's only good move of his cup of coffee with the Minnesota Wild.
Has that guy found a job somewhere else? I haven't heard.
No.
Honestly, you would have thought that Nashville might have scooped him back up as a scout.
I was talking with somebody about this last week. Like, will Paul Fenton get another job? Just period. And it's just like, that's a really good question.
He certainly won't get another GM job.
No.
God, no.
And just like, will somebody even just like take him on as a scout? Like, that's...
You got to think David Poyle would. Unless David Poyle secretly hated him.
Because if you kind of read between the lines, like, it sounded like Nashville was trying to, like, talk him up to kind of get him out the door. So
that makes a lot more sense now. Go figure.
But yeah, that's what I think of this season. What do you think's going to happen? Like you kind of said, like they're going to kind of clear that threshold, but they're going to kind of get 89, 90, 91 points.
Yeah.
Is that good enough to make the playoffs?
Probably not. I see them, like I said, right around that 88-point mark, right around, let's say, 6th or so in the Central, 5th, maybe 6th. And so I think that they're going to be, kind of gun to my head-ish. I think they're that team that either misses the playoffs by a point or makes it by a point. I don't think that there's anything I don't think there's a whole lot on either side. I don't think they're a team that's eliminated in February, selling off whatever scraps are left. I don't think they're a team that is anywhere close to the top of the division, and that's just kind of being realistic. So I would put them, right around 88 points, right around 5th to 6th in the Central, which is right around the final wild card spot. That's kind of where I'm at with it. I gun to my head, I guess I'd say they missed the playoffs, but again, I'm thinking I'm a little bit more optimistic than everyone else, and Boudreau's quote kind of speaks to that. I don't think they're as horrific as everyone thinks they are nationally or even some people locally, but don't get me wrong, they're not good. So that's kind of where I'm at.
There you have it. We predict the Wild will miss the playoffs, so if you're the gambling type, go put your own money on the Wild to make the playoffs.
Head down to Iowa
because,
and get yourself a slip.
Run 2 hours down the road and get to the casino right over the border and throw some money down. that's kind of what we think. And any other lasting thoughts here as we get ready to open the season? Do you have any other kind of like NHL predictions, like, or any teams you really want to get behind besides our beloved Golden Knights?
Yeah, God, I was going to make the joke about being excited for our Vegas Golden Knights season. I don't have any. I don't have a good feel on this year. It always seems like it takes me a little bit of while to kind of get in the feel of the NHL season. I mean, you got to think the Lightning are going to be good again. Certainly, that first round upset cannot sit well with them, and maybe they're going to kind of look at the season a little bit differently and maybe rest some guys a little bit more and maybe take a little more of a slow play approach to this season.
I kind of wonder if they're a team that they kind of just sit in the weeds during the season. Like, they're not going to be like a front runner, but then once we get to playoffs, then they just full on like crank it up, and then they just go.
It's kind of like when Golden State won 73 games or whatever it was, and then they end up losing in the finals.
It was 3-1.
Right. And so then the following season, you see them just basically completely foot off the gas. Like, just, hey, we'll make the playoffs, and we don't give a flying F what seed we are. We don't give a flying F how many wins we are.
Wins. Like, yeah. They were middle just kind of a little more relaxed. And
then they just absolutely annihilated everybody in the playoffs. So I see the Lightning being like that kind of team this year, where literally one goal to win the Stanley Cup, every single solitary thing all season long looks towards that. That's a team, an interesting team to look at. I mean, you look at New York and New Jersey with having the first 2 overall picks and them adding guys on top of that. New Jersey adding PK. New Jersey had one of the best off seasons we've seen in a long time.
New Jersey's kind of the darling of the league this year.
And that that kind of stuff rarely works out. Let's be honest, but they still could have a good season, and it kind of changes the complexion of that division too.
Right.
We've got the aging Penguins, you've got kind of the aging Capitals, and then you've got New York. You've got New York, New Jersey. The Islanders were a good team last year, kind of out of nowhere, thanks to Barry Trotz. So we'll see kind of how that division shapes out. That'll be something worth watching.
Yeah. I am looking forward to seeing how the Devils do, since they're kind of the NHL darlings. Obviously, I am still enthralled to watch Ovechkin continue his assault on Gretzky's 892, which is something that we're going to kind of start talking more and more about with each passing year.
Yeah.
I actually listened to him on Elliot Friedman's podcast, and he seems like a guy that just still wants to just keep on playing until he can't, and that's exciting to hear, because I think he can bust that record, and to do it in this kind of an era when goals aren't as fluent as they were back in the Gretzky days is pretty incredible. So, I hope that happens. I don't know, like, I'm really looking forward to the Vegas. Might try to catch a game and go to Vegas again in January. That'd that remains to be seen. Yeah.
For Wives Allowed.
Really, as much as I loved Carolina last year, I am really on their bandwagon out in the East this year. They added some players. One of them very very near and dear to the heart of this podcaster.
I know that until just now.
So when you have Nino Niederreiter and number 56 in your lineup, you're just speaking my language. So I'm trying to find some clearance 56 Vegas jerseys.
Oh yeah,
that'd be the dream.
Well, that's a good idea. Why didn't we think of that earlier?
Carolina is a team on the rise. So I think they'll be fun to watch again this year. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to this year. Florida's a curious case with Sergei Bobrovsky signing and Joel Quenneville down there, but I still don't think there's enough good parts to kind of make that a playoff team yet, but I could be wrong.
I think they're probably a fringy playoff team. Quenneville's, let's give some credit where credit's due. Quenneville's a good coach. And Bobrovsky is a good goalie, and he's probably better than, unfortunately, the aging Roberto Luongo, who retired. I think they're right on the cusp. I think they are. They're right there, and they've got some good young players. Barkov and Ekblad and guys like that. So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah. So we'll see. Do you want to do a Stanley Cup pick or not really?
Sure. Why not?
Right. Fire away.
We're here.
Yeah. We'll end the podcast on that.
I am going to go with the Lightning. Because, like I said, I think last year was a slap in the face to them. I think that it's going to renew their focus into being, okay, let's not give two Fs about being a dominant team in the regular season. Let's look at the playoffs. And I think it's also kind of wild when you think about it that this era of the Lightning have not won a cup based on how good they've been for how long they've been. I mean, the Steven Stamkos era Lightning have not won a cup. And they've been in one cup final. And that's it. And so I really think that this is kind of their year to put it all together. They just signed Point to a great contract. And they still have Vasilevsky at the top of his game. They still have Stamkos at the top of his game. Kucherov, obviously, top of his game. So I think it's their year. I think that the dominance you saw last year and kind of that swift kick to the nuts they got in the first round last year, I think is going to be the difference.
I'm really surprised you said that because I'm pushing my chips into the table. Golden Knights, baby, let's go.
I would love to see it. I would absolutely love to see it, 100%.
Yeah, because we're all in on Vegas and the Golden Knights.
Yeah,
and
I'm wearing the
whatnot,
shirt and everything.
So, yeah, you came prepared.
Golden Knights shirt on today.
I still needed some kind of Golden Knights apparel.
You do.
I'll try to get that this next time in Vegas. But
I was really disappointed at their jersey selection. I was all in on an Alex Tuck jersey.
Their stores
and
were
they did
really
not have it.
disappointing.
Yeah, they did not have one. And I was like, I would buy that. Or Holla. They didn't have Holla or Tuck. And you and I would have sold them out in that.
They could have taken all my money.
Yeah, I know.
But I just gave it to Orlando this weekend.
Yeah, it's finally are we wrapping up here? Or are we come towards? Okay, so two things. We didn't do a Bruce Boudreau quote of the week, and he had a great one, if you remember.
He did.
And I referenced it earlier because I wasn't sure if we were going to get to it or not. But I feel like it needs to be said because it's one of those. I don't want to say it's an all-timer for Bruce because, my God, is that list extensive. But it was a great quote.
It was. See if I can find it here. So I know, was that the one I quote tweeted out of the podcast?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Da, 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 da.
Technical difficulties.
Hang on.
We need
I gotta
hold
listen.
music.
Somebody ad-lib.
Conversations I've had, and we're counting on surprising people. I mean, every team that didn't win is going to say they have a chip on their shoulder. Well, all I know is when they predict you to be 32nd in a 31-team league, it might piss you off.
All right. So for those who didn't quite catch that, because I was listening to it too, Bruce said, for those that predicted us to be 32nd in a 31-team league, it's going to piss you off a little bit.
Right. He was talking about having a chip on your shoulder going into the season, and he said every team that loses has a chip. But and I'm kind of with him, and that's why I'm kind of on one notch, one half notch above optimistic for the season for them, because they are finally the playoff pressure is off of them. So also finally, there's only one new jersey introduced this summer. Carolina Hurricanes road jersey. What's your grade on that?
Solid B.
Okay, yeah, I buy that. I think we haven't even mentioned either. We're not going to do a jersey segment this season.
Yeah.
That's finally going to get killed, just because I don't think that it's certainly not out of a lost love for jerseys. Don't get us wrong.
Right.
But we just
kind of felt like we kept saying the same thing.
We've run out of things to talk about with jerseys, and we certainly will talk about jerseys, at every opportunity
when
that we're
we have
given.
news. Yeah.
But we're just not going to force ourselves to do it. I think is the
Right.
important thing. So, a couple other jersey news things. The Kings are wearing their retro throwbacks, which is phenomenal. The Vancouver Canucks are actually going to wear the flying skate this year, which is phenomenal. Everything else, I don't know. There were some other new jerseys.
Good year for throwbacks.
Yeah, the Oilers didn't go with a good throwback. I don't know what the hell they were thinking there.
The Oilers messed up again. My column.
Yeah, and the Canes are wearing Whalers jerseys again. to go with that. So
Good.
Yeah, I think that was about it. I don't know if there's any other Jersey stuff that was newsworthy at all.
I think we're still kind of waiting on a few teams to.
Yeah, we don't have any
reveal
Winter
theirs.
Classics. We don't have any
Yeah.
Stadium Series just yet. Obviously, no All-Star Game jerseys just yet. So, but so far so good. Kings throwbacks phenomenal.
Amazing.
Canucks throwbacks phenomenal. Oilers New Jersey kind of awful.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's bad.
yeah,
It's very bad.
yep.
So,
They should feel bad.
Yeah. So yeah, that can do it for us for this week. Thank you to Zone Coverage, Tom Schreier, for renewing this podcast for a 6th season.
Wait, that was up to him?
He pays the bills.
That's fair. That's fair.
I mean, it was all a mutual decision.
Yeah.
I should note, I should have put this out there earlier, but I don't think I've said this on Twitter yet, but very excited that I will be, in addition to my Wild coverage on Zone Coverage, will be expanding to Gophers hockey, as I will be doing some reporting for Gopher hockey
Tremendous.
this season.
Awesome.
Drew Cove will be he'll help me show me the ropes, essentially the first game of the season, then him and I are going to kind of tag team
Great.
Gopher hockey coverage from Mariucci Arena this season. So I am thoroughly excited for that. Kind of a unique moment for me as somebody who grew up watching and loving the Gophers to now get to kind of cover them as kind of a dream. So that's very, very cool. So hopefully you enjoy what you get out of that, in addition to my otherwise fine Wild production. So that's my final thought for the week. So yeah, that can do it for us. We will be back every week now. Gosh darn it. Whether that's Sunday or Monday, whatever day of the week it is, we're coming at you every week with hard-hitting Wild content. Smash that subscribe button on whatever the hell platform you listen to, whether that's iTunes or SoundCloud or Spotify or iHeartRadio or whatever it is. Subscribe, tell your friends, zonecoverage.com/subscribe, promo code GATG20 gets you a year subscription for $20. Ben Remington on Twitter at Ben Remington. Giles Farrell on Twitter at Giles Farrell. GATG Wild Podcast is our Twitter handle.
Yes.
Find us on Facebook, facebook.com/GATG Wild Podcast. Then again, zonecoverage.com. You can find all of our written work and podcasts there. So for Ben Remington from our unnamed bar and grill location in Roseville, we will chat at you next week.
Later.
It's not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.